Yeah, so we're really excited. We have the MOCHA trial underway to where we're looking at Montelukast after ACL reconstruction. And Montelukast, a trade name Singulair, so it's an allergy medication.
Right.
So I'll never forget, because it was the day after the first case of COVID in Kentucky. And I was at my daughter's swim meet. And if you've ever attended a swim meet and you have a swimmer in the event, you have to get there a couple hours ahead of time. So it's a lot of bleacher time.
Yep.
So I was going crazy trying to find if there was an already approved medication that could bolster this anti-inflammatory response in patients, right? So again, thinking about that group of inflammatype folks. So how can we prop up their anti-inflammatory response? And you get into the literature on persistent inflammation, and that leads to like seasonal allergies, right? Yeah. So one of the most common results with Montelukast is bolstering this anti-inflammatory response for people in order to kind of squash that persistent inflammation. Mm-hmm. So that was the whole idea. And then the more we got into it, there had actually been some animal studies that had already been done showing efficacy in an animal model of osteoarthritis and post-traumatic OA. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like a natural transition. And it's been pretty fun to see how quickly the concept was adopted, not necessarily adopted, but embraced by other investigators. So we're doing the trial not just at the University of Kentucky, but also with collaborators at UC San Francisco, and then also with folks at Cleveland Clinic and Duke doing all the analyses of the biomarkers and the MRIs and things.
No, it's so fascinating because this might be a silly question, but Kentucky has one of the worst allergy rates in the country. Is there any concern that the Montelukast will be treating people's allergies instead of helping after ACL reconstruction? Like, how do you control for some of these comorbidities that these drugs might be, since they are marketed and approved for a different disease state?
Well, it's actually been the opposite. The concern was this spring, as we're enrolling, how many people are we going to not be able to approach about being in a randomized study because they're already on it, right? Wow. So because allergies are so prevalent in Kentucky, are we going to see a bunch of patients that are already taking it and they're not willing to have a coin toss take away their allergy medication, right? But it really hasn't played out that way. So so just luck of the draw, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a potential for that, where there's going to be patients that don't sign up for a study. But we also haven't been able to figure out a really good way to see if there's already pre-existing data that we can lean on, where people might already incidentally have this answer and they just don't know it. Or if there's large data sets we could look at that might potentially give us a little more information, like the CANTOS trial, right? So that's a recent trial that was done with, I think it was more than 10,000 patients with a medication that was for blood clot prevention, so to help prevent cardiovascular events. And one of just kind of the secondary findings of the medication that they used was that the people treated with the experimental medication actually had fewer hip and knee replacements than the folks that didn't receive that intervention. So now, is that a potential treatment for OA pain and to potentially stave off joint replacement? So I think leaning on these existing medications, especially ones that have been around that have a great safety profile, so you don't have to worry about whether a medication is necessarily safe or not for the patients. That's already been well established.
That's so fascinating to me, because I think there are endless drugs that we can think about to, sort of repurpose here. And it's just such a cool, way of thinking about things. So on top of repurposing sort of these drugs for, a potential osteoarthritis treatment, which hasn't been done before, are you coupling that with, like PROs and movement data, or are you still keeping the pain and the biomarker kind of population separate, like we talked about before?
No, we're collecting all of it, right? So we want to see if patients do better or worse. And specifically with Montelukast, there's a black label warning on Montelukast for potential depression side effects. So that's something we've absolutely incorporated in, where patients get a weekly text that gauges their emotional well-being, because we don't want to put anyone in harm's way or make someone worse. So we have to monitor sometimes for things we wouldn't necessarily normally think about monitoring.
Right.
So, and we work with a psychologist just in case someone endorses suicidal ideation on a questionnaire, that it doesn't come back to the orthopedics type of researchers or, whoa, no, what do we do now? So we've had to bring in experts we wouldn't necessarily normally think of as being, part of the team for an orthopedic trial.
Well, and I think that's such a great point to think about, as, we're moving, healthcare is moving towards a more personalized treatment plans and personalized care and things like that. But I think it really speaks to how, integrated, like the integrated, it's not the right word, but how complex the OA disease is, and how many different, factors there are, and how there are, experts in other fields that need to be brought in. Because I know you were working on a trial, right, with some people from Boston about mental health and obesity and OA, and sort of really trying to highlight the complexity of these comorbidities with an osteoarthritis population. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. And that's the study, I think, where the two separate populations come together as one. Mm-hmm. Because we're chasing both the biologic response, but also kind of the psychological side of pain. And in a previous study, we found that the patients that had the most rapid cartilage breakdown over a 2-year period were those that had the combination of obesity and depression. Mm-hmm. And from the bow tie nerdy geek side, we can come up with the rationale for, oh, well, maybe this is because they have like multiple inflammatory comorbidities, right? So they have a bunch of different conditions, and kind of the stacking of these conditions sets them up for more rapid cartilage breakdown. Mm-hmm. And then it could be a much simpler answer, in that we know exercise is good for the knee, and the folks that have the hardest time starting an exercise program and sticking with one are both those that are obese, but also those that have depression, right? Mm-hmm. So we're working with Anna Maria Ranchanu, who's a psychologist at MGH in Boston.
Yep.
And she and her team have developed the Get Active OA. So it's a mind-body program that can be delivered via Zoom. And we're just now finishing up the open pilot with that study and moving on to the RCT next. But really the whole idea is, can we have this 8-week basically group Zoom-based intervention to help people increase their activity? And is there improvement in their patient-reported outcome scores? But also, is there an improvement in in their inflammatory markers?
Yeah.
So do we see both a biological and psychological benefit?
I think it's encouraging to hear that these things are in the works, and that there might already be treatments on the market that could be repurposed for OA patients. It's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's a fun spot to be.
I know. Well, Cale, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. We've covered a lot of different topics, and thank you. I know your time is very valuable, so I greatly appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.